Hello ladies and gents, it's Hagbard Celine here on another beautiful afternoon, and today we're going to make this a quick live one because I don't have access to this rig very long. I was sent this as a citation, if you will, as to why I was a bigot on one of my last videos. It is called the Ultimate White Privilege Statistics and Data Post. And ironically, it's done by a conservative Christian, and they are starting to get involved in this quite heavily. It started within the black communities in the church, and now it appears to have extended into the upper middle class white community, who is just as, well, easily duped as the upper middle class left community when it comes to these issues, because they haven't actually had contact with the people they're trying to help. Maybe you're like me, and you're tired of rhetoric. My wife is a nursing student, and one of the current emphases in medicine is evidence-based medicine, as opposed to eminence-based medicine. And that's a good thing. When I'm in the hospital or visiting my doctor, I want them using treatments that science actually proves are good and do work. Yeah, naturally, Tucker, thanks for making, medicine, which is an actual science, somewhat related to sociological issues. It's really helpful, Tucker. I have come to take a similar approach to politics. I'm not interested in cliché ideas or rehashed rhetoric. So you wrote a whole article of it. You wrote an entire, what I would deem to be a multiple-page article about it using nothing but rehashed rhetoric. Alright, I want evidence-based policies, and I try to take data-based positions. If you're like me in this way, then I present to you a data-based approach to discussing the issues of white privilege and systemic racism, what it is, whether it truly exists, and what it looks like. Mind you, he's going to get into this quite deeply. I'll pause for a second and show you. He covers pretty much everything you could ever possibly want to talk about. His inspirations are people like Talara Cortez and several of the other black nationalists floating around right now with complete impunity that no one's allowed to actually criticize. Others have used various analogies to explain that white privilege is the immortal, invisible knapsack, which, by the way, has come to become the white privilege test when it gets, streamlined a bit. I advise you check it out, because I'd guess several of us white guys can say the same thing. And the bicycle analogy, which is that black people are bicycle riders, while car people are all the whites. And that car people regularly abuse people that are on bicycles. So that's the analogy he's going with. But those are focused on explaining what privilege is, and what it is not, and what we mean when we talk about it, more so than on presenting data to prove the disparities that those approaches take for granted do indeed exist. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing, and like I said, I've got to keep this short, because I don't have access to this computer for very long today. That being said, what they're saying here are that young black boys are more likely to be shot and killed by police. This is the HuffPo graphic. I think we've all, or the Vox graphic. I think we've all seen it about 1,000 times. It's essentially been rendered meaningless because everybody understands what's actually going on when they see why these things occur. But these are his statistics. These are his citations. ProPublica.org and an FBI supplemental homicide report. That's one of his only, I think one of 2 or 3 actual citations. The rest of the ones he uses: civilrights.org, publications, racial profiling, quickfacts.gov, simply to get the number of people that existed in the city at the time, NCLU, Huffington Post, The Reformer, and the ACLU. We go down here further. We see HuffPo, Health and Time, Washington Post, Sentencing Project. And here is one of the only actual citations. Now, I only point this out because he even misuses citations, and what I have to assume is willfully, in the most frustrating of manners. Because this is what caught me. Because I was looking for actual citations when I first started this, which is why I burned most of my time doing the research for this, because, well, he's lying. What he says here is, according to the University of Michigan study, black defendants face significantly more severe charges than whites, even after controlling for criminal behavior. Now, he quotes this after talking about the statistics up here, which the citation he gives, number 34, right here, is this study. It is this fucking study, in which the abstract says 80% of this disparities can be explained away. Right here is the quote he pulls, and he pulls it from right under the abstract, wherein they say 80% of the disparities. On average, blacks receive almost 10% longer sentences than comparable to whites on the same crime. At least half of this gap is explained by the initial prosecutor's charging choices. It is based on the existence of mandatory minimum sentences and the desire the system has for prosecutors to get a guilty plea. Nothing more, nothing less. That said, I would also like to point out that he says that this approach shows that most, but not all of the gap in sentence length can be explained by the difference in cases pre-charging traits, especially arrest offense and criminal history. When the decompositions are then performed using the variables alone, black sentences are still nearly 10%. So it's probably not even 10% higher. That even is down to about 3% once you take into account the mandatory minimum sentencing data. So there's a 3% disparity rate. Of course, a black woman is 10 times less likely to be sentenced than a black man, and a white man is only 6 times less likely. But I'm sure it's all about race, isn't it, Mr. Tucker? I'm sure you've got it covered, and you've even got some great sources down here to further our information, right? You've got some great sources for us. Further reading. Perhaps the even more common objection is found in the mentality that self-righteously suggests that black men should just get themselves together in a single generation. I've been there too, and if that's you, I ask only that you first reserve judgment while doing just a little bit more reading. Read these 2 articles and then ask yourself if it makes much sense to place all of the onus on black men to pull themselves up by their bootstraps in a system that has consistently and deliberately prevented them from doing so. And his sources are Joshua Dubois and Ta-Nehisi Coates, or whatever the fuck his made-up black national name is. That's your citation. Seriously, this is what you're saying we need to learn from. A man that, frankly speaking, would want you not to exist. And then this nice gentleman spends all kinds of his time responding to people in the comment sections for even disagreeing remotely with him, and then patting on the back anyone that agrees with him. I know it says at the top, right here, that it'll be relaunching with a new focus on politics, social justice, and radical reconciliation, but I'm not overspeaking when I say I sincerely hope that this venture fails, friend. Because you're a lying, deceitful sack of shit, and that is essentially the last fucking thing we need. Like I said, guys, this is just a little rant because I'm low on time and I wanted to bring to your attention J.B.W. Tucker, who is just a doll of a human being. Thanks for being here. I hope you got something out of this, maybe amusement, maybe irritation, who knows? But either way, thanks for being here. I'll be back next week and I'll be sure to manage my time a little bit better. So, stay safe, good luck, and goodbye.